A thumb swipes a glass screen. A credit card chip locks into a terminal. A global positioning system pings a satellite in low Earth orbit. These are the frictionless, invisible transactions of your modern life. But beneath the sleek silicon of your smartphone lies a physical tether. Your device is not speaking to the cloud. It is transmitting directly to a militarized Cold War fossil buried in the damp peat of the English countryside. I need you to understand the exact nature of this transaction. While you watch this video, your device has silently broadcast your exact coordinates, your hardware footprint, and your behavioral metadata to a server architecture designed before you were even born. Ignorance of this invisible plumbing is the ultimate tax you pay on your privacy in 2026. You are bleeding data, and you do not even feel the cut. We are going to conduct a forensic, step-by-step deconstruction of the original architectural blueprint known as Echelon. By analyzing declassified server logs, hardware patents, and the physical routes of submarine cables, we will expose the evidence. You will learn how to spot the invisible tripwires of global surveillance that dictate the boundaries of your daily life. We are going to map the panopticon. Thick fog rolls over the freezing moors of Yorkshire, England. Through the mist, giant geometric white radomes loom like alien eggs against a slate-grey sky. This is Royal Air Force Menwith Hill. To the casual observer, it is a static military installation. But through the eyes of a signals intelligence traffic analyst, this geometry is a massive, pulsing artery. Invisible microwave beams shoot continuously into the exosphere. The analyst stares at the monitors in a windowless basement, bathed in the harsh fluorescent light of the server floor. The operational protocol is cold and methodical. At exactly 1400 hours, the Menwith Hill arrays capture their 2 millionth communication of the day. It is not analyzed locally. In less than a second, the raw packet data is encrypted and routed instantly across the Atlantic Ocean to an archive in Maryland. This constant hemorrhage of personal information was never the original objective. When the concrete foundation of this base was poured in 1954, it was not built to listen to civilian conversations. The official mandate was strictly military. The arrays were designed to intercept analog telemetry from Soviet ballistic missile tests, catching the faint radio frequency bounce off the Earth's ionosphere. The mission profile remained locked on military targets until a critical vulnerability was discovered. By 1966, the intelligence community realized a terrifying oversight in the construction of the new civilian infrastructure. Intelsat communications satellites, the backbone of early global telephone networks, were transmitting their entire data payloads completely unencrypted. The atmosphere itself became an unguarded gold mine. The investigator sees this exact moment as the origin point of the modern dragnet. It was the architectural pivot where espionage shifted from targeted military surveillance to the indiscriminate harvesting of civilian life. The airwaves were saturated with raw, unprotected human interaction. Trade secrets, diplomatic cables, and domestic phone calls were simply bouncing through space, waiting to be pulled from the sky. The sheer volume of this intercepted data created an immediate physical crisis. Processing millions of unauthorized signals requires a brutal industrial footprint. The physical architecture of Menwith Hill demands massive, continuous cooling systems. Today, the station consumes enough electricity to power a mid-sized American city just to keep the decryption servers from melting down into a puddle of toxic silicon. This power consumption is the paper trail we follow. It proves that the cloud is not an ethereal, magical space where data floats freely. It is a heavily fortified, militarized physical infrastructure running extremely hot. The footprint of this facility cannot be hidden from thermal imaging or energy grids. It is a localized industrial behemoth built for the sole purpose of mathematical extraction. We are looking at a crime scene that operates in plain sight, protected by bureaucratic jargon and razor wire. The analyst in the basement knows that every single email, financial transaction, and location ping routed through European nodes inevitably brushes against this dragnet. It is an automated vacuum, a system of indiscriminate collection that violates the fundamental premise of targeted suspicion. But the most glaring anomaly of this entire operation is not the volume of the data stolen, nor the staggering electrical cost of keeping the extraction servers online. The true mystery lies in the geographical and legal jurisdiction of the facility itself. We're looking at a surveillance operation that completely bypasses the democratic oversight of the very soil it was built upon. Look closely at the paper trail and the chain of command. The anomaly of Menwith Hill presents a paradox that breaks every rule of national sovereignty. Why does a foreign intelligence agency own and operate the largest, most intrusive electronic monitoring station in the world, positioned directly on British soil? To find the motive, we must trace the data back to a secret signed in blood and ink. I traced the routing logs from Menwith Hill, following the digital breadcrumbs backwards. We are looking at terabytes of packet data flowing across the Atlantic, a massive offshore transaction of human privacy. But to find the motive, the forensics journalist must look past the glowing monitors and fiber optics. You have to trace this data back to a smoky, dimly lit conference room in 1946, where the original legal pact authorized this perpetual transfer. In that room, there are no servers, only the scratch of a fountain pen on classified paper. The journalist stares at the archival photographs, surrounded by multiple glowing screens at 3 a.m. He sees the exact moment the blueprint was drawn. The ink bleeds into the parchment, and in his mind, it morphs into a glowing digital map. The architecture of your modern surveillance was drafted by men who had never seen a microchip. The anomaly we face is a legal one. The Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution and equivalent laws across Western democracies explicitly forbid governments from conducting dragnet surveillance on their own citizens without a warrant. It is the foundational rule of a free society. So, the investigator faces a paradox. How do you construct a machine that spies on your own people when your highest laws strictly prohibit it? You find a loophole. The intelligence community realized that while it is illegal to wiretap your own citizens, there is no law preventing you from wiretapping a foreign nation. And more importantly, there is no law preventing a foreign ally from handing you their intelligence. If you want to bypass the Constitution, you simply ask your neighbor to do the dirty work for you. It is a brilliant, cynical laundering operation for domestic espionage. The evidence is buried in declassified archives. On March 5, 1946, the United States and the United Kingdom signed the secret Yakuza Agreement. This was the foundational contract. Over the following years, they brought Canada, Australia, and New Zealand into the fold. This coalition became known as the Five Eyes. It was an intelligence cartel designed to operate in the shadows, completely insulated from public oversight. The forensics journalist maps these 5 nations on his monitors. The glowing lines connect Washington, London, Ottawa, Canberra, and Wellington. The mathematical genius of this pact was its geographic division. Each nation was assigned a specific, massive hemisphere to monitor. The entire globe was carved up into 5 distinct, color-coded zones of absolute control. There was no overlap, and there were no blind spots left on the board. By geographically distributing the hardware, they created a seamless 24-hour net across the Earth. When the operators in Maryland clocked out, the listening posts in the Australian outback were already online, sweeping the radio frequencies. The sun never set on the Five Eyes. They built a planetary antenna, capturing everything from diplomatic cables to the background noise of civilian telecommunications. This brings us back to the loophole. To circumvent domestic wiretapping laws, the cartel initiated a bureaucratic shell game. British intelligence would aim their receivers at American domestic traffic, vacuuming up the communications of U.S. citizens. Simultaneously, American intelligence would monitor the British public. Then, they simply swapped the intercepted data across the Atlantic. Your privacy was traded like a commodity on a dark exchange. The investigator looks at the paper trail of these exchanges. It is not an emotional process. It is purely administrative. Files were handed over, intercepts were filed away, and no domestic laws were technically broken. The agencies maintained perfect, plausible deniability. If a senator asked if the National Security Agency was spying on Americans, the director could look them in the eye and say no, because technically, Her Majesty's government was doing it. For 2 decades, this system relied on human operators manually transcribing analog signals, but the volume of international traffic was increasing exponentially. The journalist cross-references the historical intercepts with the explosion of global telecommunications in the late 20th century. The ink on the UK-USA agreement was static, but the sheer amount of data flowing through the atmosphere was becoming mathematically impossible to process. A human analyst can only listen to one tape at a time. They get tired, they lose focus, and they require a salary. The cartel realized that the old methods of espionage were failing under the weight of information overload. By 1971, the nature of the beast had to fundamentally change. The intelligence sharing between the Five Eyes evolved away from targeted physical military intercepts into something far more insidious. It transformed into a formalized, highly automated system. The agencies stopped looking for specific suspects and began vacuuming up entire communication grids. They needed a mechanism that did not sleep, did not require a warrant, and could filter millions of signals per second without human intervention. This required the largest deployment of computational power the world had ever seen outside of the nuclear weapons program. The protocol was completely rewritten. The analog spies were replaced by humming mainframes and unforgiving algorithms. The Five Eyes had officially built a machine capable of reading the entire planet's mail simultaneously. This automated global dragnet was given a highly classified code name. They called it Echelon. And with its activation, the era of human privacy quietly came to a mathematical end. The mathematical end of human privacy did not look like a dystopian movie. It looked like a windowless basement at Fort Meade in 1971, bathed in harsh fluorescent light. The signals intelligence traffic analyst standing in this room is completely overwhelmed. The sheer volume of stolen analog data pouring in from those radar domes across the Atlantic has broken the existing protocol. Here is the dragnet paradox. When you collect 10 million phone calls a day, human analysts become mathematically useless. You cannot hire enough spies to listen to the world. If it takes 1 hour to transcribe a 1-hour conversation, a daily intercept quota requires an army of millions just to process the backlog. If you record everything without a filter, you effectively possess nothing at all. The intelligence cartel needed a mechanism to find the needle when they were buried under a continent-sized haystack. The solution was not more manpower. It was cold automation. The analyst feeds a thick stack of rectangular paper into the mainframe reader. The deafening clatter of punch cards and massive magnetic tape reels spinning up echoes off the concrete walls. The machine is taking over the hunt. This is the core mechanism of the Echelon network. The protocol loaded into these mainframes was a decentralized watch list, officially classified as the dictionary. It was not a single database, but a perfectly synchronized program installed on massive computers at every single intercept station across the Five Eyes grid. The architecture of global surveillance was now effectively running on autopilot. Instead of blindly recording every analog voice and static-filled line, the dictionary operated as an active filter. It scanned live, unencrypted intercepts of telexes, international faxes, and the digital screech of early modems. The analyst watches the tape reels twitch. The machine is reading the traffic in real time, executing a brutal, binary logic against every piece of data passing through the air. The protocol was hunting for specific, hard-coded keywords. A diplomat's name, a suspect address, or high-value triggers like the word plutonium or assassination. The moment you typed or spoke a flagged term, the architecture noticed. You did not have to be a target of a specific investigation. You simply had to use a word that the intelligence apparatus had decided was inherently suspicious. If a civilian communication hit a dictionary threshold, the system executed its directive instantly. It automatically recorded the audio or text, stripping it from the millions of benign messages, and routed it directly to an analyst at Fort Meade or the government communications headquarters in the United Kingdom. This transfer of intercepted evidence occurred in a matter of milliseconds. The traffic analyst does not need to search anymore. They simply wait for the red light on the console to flash, signaling that the dictionary has caught something in its net. The investigator looking at this workflow sees the perfection of the crime. There is no messy paperwork to justify a wiretap. There is no judge reviewing the evidence to determine if an interception is legally warranted. This represented a terrifying paradigm shift in the history of civil liberties. For the first time in human civilization, machines, not elected judges or human investigators, were deciding who was suspicious enough to monitor. The burden of proof was erased. The presumption of innocence was replaced by a mathematical filter scanning your private correspondence for a predetermined vocabulary of guilt. You must understand the sheer scale of this operation. The Five Eyes had successfully turned the global telecommunications infrastructure against its own users. Every time you sent a fax across a border in the 1980s, a military computer read it before the recipient did. The dragnet was absolute, catching industrial secrets, political strategies, and the private lives of ordinary citizens. The beauty of the dictionary system was its scalability. As global communication grew, the agencies simply added more tape reels, upgraded the cooling systems, and expanded the keyword list. The traffic analyst sitting in the humming server room became nothing more than the final, biological endpoint of a vast, unfeeling mathematical process. The machine did the thinking. The human merely filed the report. But this invisible empire relied entirely on the nature of the transmission. Echelon was a creature of the sky, designed to catch microwave beams and satellite bounces floating freely through the atmosphere. The system was perfect for the 20th century. It was an elegant, frictionless panopticon, built on the assumption that global communications would always remain in the air, vulnerable and exposed. Then the foundational physics of the Internet shifted. the target suddenly moved. The global flow of data sank beneath the waves, locked inside glass tubes at the bottom of the ocean. The traffic analyst watches the satellite intercept volume plummet on the monitors. The intelligence community is about to go blind, and preventing that darkness will require an entirely new, incredibly dangerous physical architecture. The intelligence community is about to go blind, and preventing that darkness will require an entirely new, incredibly dangerous physical architecture. I traced the panic in the declassified memos from the late 1990s. The humming server rooms of the Echelon network suddenly fell terrifyingly quiet. The global flow of data was vanishing from the sky. The targets had not stopped talking. They had simply migrated to a medium that microwave antennas could no longer reach. This period is known in intelligence circles as the Dark Age of Signals. For decades, the Five Eyes Alliance relied on the sloppy physics of radio waves, catching the natural bleed of satellite bounces in the upper atmosphere. But the foundational architecture of human communication was fundamentally mutating. The lucrative era of plucking secrets out of thin air was over. The target had moved deep underground, and the ultimate spy machine was suddenly deaf. The geography of the new battlefield is hostile, cold, and utterly removed from human sight. Plunge beneath the waves, past the continental shelf, down into the crushing darkness of the abyssal plain. Here, the pressure is absolute. There is no light, no warmth, and, theoretically, no jurisdiction. Yet, this alien landscape is precisely where the nervous system of modern civilization was being hastily laid down in the final years of the 20th century. I cross-referenced the telecommunications data from the era, and the mathematical shift is staggering. By the year 2000, commercial satellite traffic plummeted to less than 1% of global communications. The world was rapidly plugging in, and 99% of all planetary data moved to deep-sea fiber-optic cables. The collective consciousness of the human race was now flowing through glass tubes, no thicker than a garden hose, buried at the bottom of the ocean. For the architects of global surveillance, this shift represented an existential threat. How do you monitor a world that has suddenly encrypted its physical infrastructure behind miles of crushing salt water? The answer required looking backward to a remarkably audacious Cold War blueprint. I pulled the heavily redacted files on Operation Ivy Bells, a highly classified mission from the 1970s that proved the ocean floor was not an impenetrable sanctuary. During Operation Ivy Bells, American submarines managed to locate and physically tap a Soviet underwater communication cable in the Sea of Okhotsk. Divers installed massive recording pods over the raw copper lines, capturing unfiltered military chatter. It was a masterpiece of analog espionage. But copper emits a detectable electromagnetic field. Glass does not. The fiber-optic cables of the new millennium transmitted data using pulses of light, trapped within a perfect mirror. You cannot simply splice a fiber-optic cable like an old telephone wire. If you cut the glass, the light stops, the connection drops, and alarms instantly trigger at switching stations across the globe. The intelligence community needed a way to bleed the light without breaking the circuit. They required a surgical intervention on a microscopic scale, executed under thousands of pounds of hydrostatic pressure. The solution was a marvel of dark engineering. Through the pitch-black water, a massive shadow glides silently over the seabed. It is a highly classified, heavily modified nuclear submarine, the USS Jimmy Carter, hovering directly over a glowing, thick fiber-optic cable. The vessel stabilizes in the current, Mechanical hatches open, and robotic arms slowly extend into the freezing void. They are not carrying torpedoes. They are carrying custom-machined optical splitters designed to embrace the glass veins of the Internet. The robotic arms carefully clamp the optical splitter onto the cable's protective sheath. The mechanism operates on a terrifyingly simple principle of physics. If you bend a fiber-optic strand just enough, a fraction of the photons will leak out of the microscopic core. The splitter captures this escaping light, perfectly cloning the signal without disrupting the original data flow. The target never experiences a drop in bandwidth. The theft is completely invisible. This means the National Security Agency is no longer waiting for data to leak into the atmosphere. They are entirely bypassing the sky. By installing these parasitic devices on the physical backbone of the Internet, they are drinking directly from the fire hose. They are capturing the raw, unencrypted flow of global commerce, private emails, and financial transactions at the exact speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. Every single keystroke you make, every intimate photograph you send, every secure banking login you execute, physically travels as a photon through these underwater arteries. And at the bottom of the ocean, a mirrored prism is silently duplicating that photon, sending one copy to its rightful destination and routing the other directly into a classified military server. The scale of this interception defies human comprehension. We are looking at the exact moment the intelligence community achieved godlike access to the digital realm. They did not just hack a specific target's computer. They physically hacked the planet's infrastructure. The entire Internet, with all its messy, brilliant, and intensely private human data, is being continuously, silently cloned in the crushing depths of the sea. This is the absolute apex of the surveillance state's physical power. If this terrifying scale of invisible engineering blows your mind, hit the like button to support this forensic investigation. To make sure you do not miss the solution to this unfolding architectural mystery, subscribe to the channel right now. And I want to know your thoughts. Do you think we ever stood a chance of keeping our digital lives private once the cables were laid? Let me know in the comments below. We are just getting started. The original Echelon network was officially obsolete, replaced by an unnamed, infinitely more powerful underwater apparatus. The traffic analyst sitting in a windowless basement no longer parses intercepted radio static. They are now swimming in an ocean of pure, high-fidelity broadband data. The system had successfully adapted to the new physics of the world. It had secured its permanent grip on the throat of global telecommunications. But this victory of engineering carried a fatal flaw. Deploying nuclear submarines to physically splice glass cables under thousands of feet of hostile ocean is dangerous, wildly expensive, and prone to logistical failure. As the volume of global data continued to double every few years, a darker, more efficient logic began to take hold in the intelligence community. Why steal the data in transit when you can just take it directly from the source? The logic of the intelligence community is ruthlessly pragmatic. Deploying nuclear submarines to the crushing depths of the Atlantic to physically tap a glass vein is an engineering marvel, but it is also a massive liability. Saltwater corrodes, missions fail, and the financial cost is staggering. The traffic analyst staring at the screen knows there is a much cleaner way to get your data. The digital forensics journalist stares at the architectural blueprints of a pristine, blindingly white Silicon Valley server farm. Amidst the endless, uniform rows of corporate data racks, a stark anomaly appears. A thick bundle of black fiber-optic cables physically branches off from the main servers. It does not route back to the public grid. It disappears directly into a locked, unmarked metal door. This unmarked room is the corpse in our investigation. It represents the ultimate outsourcing of espionage. Why risk international incidents stealing data in the dark ocean when you can simply walk through the front door of the corporations hoarding it? The journalist traces the paper trail from that locked door, hunting for the exact moment the government stopped hacking the network and started hacking the law. The paper trail leads directly to the trauma of September 11th, 2001. In the chaotic aftermath, the Patriot Act was signed into law, radically expanding the legal definition of allowable domestic surveillance. It was a legislative bulldozer. The old protocols of probable cause were quietly buried under the justification of national security, granting agencies unprecedented access to private lives. For decades, the intelligence apparatus operated as a passive vacuum. Echelon swept up whatever radio waves or stray photons happened to cross its path. But the journalist sees a terrifying shift in the archives. Post 9/11, the passive vacuum was no longer enough. The surveillance state demanded precision. It demanded an active, targeted extraction mechanism to mine the growing digital gold rush. The focus shifts from the military installations in the Yorkshire moors to the sunlit campuses of California. The corporations building our search engines and social networks were amassing the greatest psychological dossiers in human history. To the investigator, these databases were not businesses. They were the ultimate intelligence asset, and the government found a legal crowbar to break them wide open. The evidence crystallizes in a highly classified slide deck from 2007 detailing a program codenamed Prism. This initiative secretly compelled the world's largest technology monopolies to provide direct backdoor access to their user servers. The black fiber-optic cable disappearing into the locked room was not a rogue hack. It was a federally mandated bypass built directly into the infrastructure. Prism transformed the fundamental nature of the wiretap. The journalist cross-references the capability logs, realizing the sheer granular control the system afforded. Analysts no longer had to wait for a target to transmit a message across a tapped undersea cable. By exploiting the corporate backdoor, they could legally requisition your entire digital history directly from the servers where it was permanently stored. Unlike Echelon's indiscriminate trawling, Prism was a sniper rifle. It allowed operators sitting at Fort Meade to actively pull targeted search histories, cloud-stored photographs, and live chat logs. If you typed it into a search bar or saved it as a draft, the system could extract it without ever breaking encryption. The data was simply handed over before the lock was even turned on your private device. The immediate question is why the tech titans surrendered so quietly. The journalist digs into the compliance records, uncovering a brilliant, cynical, bureaucratic trap. The companies were not willing participants. They were legally gagged by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. These secret court orders carried severe criminal penalties for defiance and an absolute mandate for permanent silence. The FISA court orders forced these corporations into a schizophrenic existence. On the public stage, their executives launched massive marketing campaigns promising ironclad user privacy and end-to-end encryption. But behind the locked metal doors, they were legally compelled to build the compliance software themselves, writing the very code that allowed government servers to siphon their customers' private data. This creates an intellectual horror for the modern citizen. You carefully choose your passwords. You read the terms of service, and you trust the glowing padlock icon on your browser. But the forensics prove that your security model is a theater production. The lock on the front door is completely irrelevant when the architect of the building has legally mandated a master key for the concrete foundation. The investigator recognizes the dark symmetry of the digital economy. The platforms that connect us are offered free of charge because your behavioral data is the actual product. By coercing these tech giants, the intelligence community effectively nationalized the surveillance capitalism model. They transformed the corporate data mining apparatus into a subsidized extension of the military-industrial complex. The physical wiretap is obsolete when the target willingly uploads their entire consciousness to a centralized server. The black cable in the Silicon Valley server farm is the ultimate evidence of this surrender. The government realized they did not need to hunt you across the global network. They just needed to wait for you to voluntarily hand your life over to a private company, and then they subpoenaed the company. But securing access to the database was only half the equation. As the Prism program sucked in billions of targeted records, human analysts were once again drowning in a sea of raw text and audio. To weaponize this infinite archive, the system had to stop reading our words and start analyzing our mathematical footprints. The content of your conversation was about to become completely irrelevant. As the database is filled with billions of intercepted text messages, the intelligence community realized a terrifying truth. The content of your conversation is completely irrelevant. Down in the windowless basements of Fort Meade, the hum of blade servers drowns out human voices. The signals intelligence analyst stares at a high-altitude drone feed over a barren desert. They're not looking for a face. On the monitor, the target is a swirling cloud of glowing data points. It is a clustering of subscriber identity module pings and wireless fidelity handshakes that form a human silhouette. The analyst feels a cold, methodical exhaustion. They know the old wiretapper's paradox. People lie on the phone. They use code words, they speak in riddles, or they simply stay silent. The investigator follows the paper trail to a brutal conclusion. We do not care what you are saying. We only care who you called, where you were standing, and how long you spoke. Audio transcripts require translation, cultural context, and subjective interpretation. Mathematical footprints require nothing but processing power. The system shifted from listening to tracing. This evolution transformed the infrastructure of espionage into a lethal weapon. In 2014, a former director of the National Security Agency stated a chilling fact on the public record. He said, and I quote, "We kill people based on metadata." This was not hyperbole. It was the new operational doctrine of the global panopticon. You must understand the nature of this evidence. Metadata is simply the data about the data. It is the exact time your device connected to the network. It is the duration of your call. It is your precise geographic location down to the meter. This telemetry provides a far more accurate pattern of life analysis than any intercepted conversation ever could. The mathematics of your daily routine expose your deepest secrets. You can encrypt your messages with military-grade software, but the delivery vehicle still broadcasts its coordinates. The analyst at Fort Meade watches these coordinates light up on a grid. They see a device pinging a cell tower in a hostile zone. The device moves to a safe house. The true power of the system reveals itself through proximity. By tracking the physical distance between two unique media access control addresses over a 30-day period, algorithms can calculate relationships. They can mathematically prove an illicit affair a covert meeting, or a hidden command structure without ever hearing a single spoken word. The evidence is purely circumstantial, yet mathematically absolute. If your smartphone and the smartphone of a known suspect travel together, turn off at the exact same time, and separate at dawn, the server makes a definitive ruling. You are an accomplice. The protocol does not require a confession. The protocol only requires a geographic intersection. Through the eyes of the analyst, humanity is reduced to geometry. Under the harsh fluorescent light, they review redacted physical files that contain no transcripts, only timelines and coordinates. It is the cynicism of someone who has mapped the private movements of a million strangers. They know that your physical trajectory is your truest confession. This abstract geometry translates into kinetic violence in the real world. The drone hovering over the desert is not guided by a pilot tracking a physical vehicle. It is locked onto the digital exhaust of a specific microchip. The crosshairs follow the metadata, blindly trusting the server's calculation. The man holding the phone is entirely incidental. This algorithmic targeting fundamentally altered the nature of warfare and justice. It completely removed human intuition from the kill chain. The seasoned detective's hunch is dead and buried. It has been replaced by a cold, indisputable mathematical probability. The machine generates a percentage of guilt based on your digital associations. When the algorithm scores a target at 99% probability, the moral decision is essentially automated. The human operator in the windowless basement merely signs the execution order to satisfy the bureaucracy. The drone fires its payload. The swirling cloud of data points on the monitor winks out in a flash of white light. The target is neutralized. I've looked at the architecture of this system, and the implications are terrifying. The exact same lethal calculus running in that desert is running against your device right now. You generate the exact same metadata points every time you cross the street, buy a coffee, or unlock your front door. You are plotting your own coordinates on the grid. The investigator sees the ultimate, cynical irony of the surveillance age. We spent decades building the most sophisticated global eavesdropping machine in human history. We tapped the bottom of the ocean and coerced the largest technology monopolies on Earth, only to realize that actually listening to humans was an inefficient waste of resources. Behavior is the only metric that matters, and behavior is written in metadata. But tracking the metadata of 8 billion people simultaneously creates a new anomaly. The sheer volume of telemetry shatters human comprehension. To manage this infinite web of coordinates, the intelligence community had to surrender control to something far more alien. To manage this infinite web of coordinates, the intelligence community had to surrender control to something far more alien. When you intercept 70 petabytes of raw data every single day, the human brain simply fails. The sheer gravity of that information crushes our biological capacity to read it. I look at the routing protocols flowing across these monitors at 3 a.m, and the conclusion is mathematically absolute. We built a dragnet so massive, no human could ever cast it. On this curved monitor in my home office, the reality of the 2026 architecture plays out in real time. Lines of self-writing code cascade down the screen, processing global traffic. An artificial intelligence interface effortlessly maps a social network of 10 million unique nodes in 3 seconds flat. It highlights behavioral anomalies in glaring red ink long before a human analyst even walks into the building. The machine is actively doing the forensic detective work. This is the absolute peak of the Echelon lineage. The original engineers worried about processing 10 million phone calls a day. That number is now a microscopic rounding error. To navigate the unimaginably vast oceans of modern intercepted telemetry, the intelligence apparatus required a synthetic brain. The only entity on Earth capable of actually reading the entire Internet at once is an artificial intelligence. It does not sleep, it does not blink, and it never loses a paper trail. The forensic data logs confirm the shift. By the year 2026, the sheer volume of global intercepts forced a radical technological pivot. The agencies deployed advanced large language models directly into the data streams. These systems do not just read open text. They are designed to natively analyze encrypted traffic patterns in real time, looking for the microscopic structural anomalies that betray human intent. They are hunting for the mathematical shadow of the encrypted word. Think of it as a digital polygraph applied to the entire human race simultaneously. The algorithm watches the rhythm of the data packets leaving your phone. It measures the microsecond delays between your keystrokes and the geographic shifting of your network address. It cross-references your digital gate against billions of known criminal profiles. You do not need to speak a single legible word for the machine to understand exactly what you are hiding. The encrypted silence is deafening. This brings us to the most terrifying evolution in the intelligence protocol. Modern systems no longer simply react to existing threats or past crimes. That is the old way of doing business. Today, the architecture utilizes predictive behavioral modeling to calculate the statistical likelihood of a citizen committing an offense before it ever happens. The algorithm generates a dynamic threat score based on your daily routine. It is a mathematical pre-crime division operating without a warrant. I track the metadata linkage charts across my screens, watching the predictive models update in real time. If your digital footprint suddenly diverges from your established baseline, your threat score spikes. Buying a burner phone, changing your encrypted messaging app, or standing near a flagged political protest for 14 minutes. These isolated events are instantly synthesized into a probability matrix. The machine mathematically decides you are guilty before you have even formed the thought. But what happens to the data the intelligence community cannot read today? The files locked behind military-grade encryption that currently baffle our best silicon chips. The answer lies in the harsh reality of quantum computing. The emergence of quantum decryption threats has triggered a chilling operational protocol across the Five Eyes network. It is officially known as a store now, decrypt later policy. And it guarantees that your digital secrets have a definitive, inescapable expiration date. The evidence of this policy is hiding in plain sight. Every secure financial transaction, every encrypted medical record, and every private message you send today is quietly intercepted and warehoused. It flows directly into the massive server farms in the Utah desert. The intelligence community is simply hoarding your encrypted life, patiently waiting for the day a quantum computer comes online with the power to crack the cryptographic locks. Your hidden past is a ticking time bomb. As a digital forensics investigator, I find this reality utterly paralyzing. You are operating under the dangerous illusion that your encrypted communication is ephemeral, that a deleted message is actually gone forever. But the forensic trail proves otherwise. The architecture captures everything, permanently etching your digital life into miles of magnetic tape and solid-state drives. They are building a retroactive time machine, perfectly preserving your private data for a future interrogation. We are now approaching the singularity of the surveillance state. The most damning evidence found in recent academic audits reveals a critical loss of human oversight. The architecture has completely outgrown its human creators. The deployed artificial intelligence algorithms are processing data sets so infinitely vast that they are finding correlations completely invisible to the biological brain. The machine is drawing conclusions from the raw noise, and the math is entirely black-boxed. The intelligence officers sitting in those windowless basements at Fort Meade are now facing an unprecedented crisis. They receive the target dossiers and the calculated threat scores, but they cannot actually explain the machine's underlying logic. The neural network has become an alien entity, operating on a mathematical plane we cannot access. When the algorithm flags a citizen as a lethal threat, the human operator cannot verify the math. They simply have to trust the black box. This is the ultimate betrayal of the scientific method. We handed the keys to the kingdom to a probabilistic engine that we fundamentally do not understand. The original mandate of Echelon was to protect Western civilization from the threat of thermonuclear annihilation. Now, that same architecture has mutated into an autonomous, self-sustaining organism. It views the very citizens it was built to protect as mathematical variables to be continuously managed, predicted, and tightly controlled. I stare at the glowing fiber-optic packet data filling my monitors, tracing the endless streams of information flowing into the void. Millions of human lives, reduced to raw hexadecimal code and fed into the maw of a synthetic god. There is no off switch to pull, no central server to unplug. The global surveillance machine is fully decentralized, continuously learning from our behavior and optimizing its own dragnet. We built a perfect digital prison, and we are the wardens of nothing. The investigator's protocol demands a search for a vulnerability, a backdoor in the code, or a legal mechanism to shut it down. But the forensic evidence yields a chilling verdict. The system is structurally flawless. The integration of artificial intelligence was the final, inescapable lock on the door. Our private lives have been successfully converted into training data for a machine that will outlive us all. The only remaining question is what this entity intends to do with us next. I'm closing the final dossier. The forensic trail that began in the foggy moors of Yorkshire and descended to the crushing depths of the ocean floor has finally surfaced. It ends right outside your window. When you look down at a hyper-modern city at night, you are not seeing concrete and glass. You are looking at the most perfect, inescapable panopticon ever constructed by human hands. The investigation is over, and the verdict is absolute. The original Echelon network was a targeted spear, forged in the paranoia of the Cold War and thrown directly at Soviet mainframes. It had a defined enemy and a singular military purpose. But infrastructure possesses its own brutal logic. The mathematical scaling of the system dictated that total security requires total information awareness. That spear shattered, morphing into a planetary net woven seamlessly into the fabric of your daily commerce. As an investigator, I look for the smoking gun, or the grand conspiracy room filled with shadowy architects pulling the strings. But the terrifying truth of 2026 is that no such room exists. There is only the cold, unfeeling momentum of bureaucratic self-preservation. The intelligence agencies did not have to conquer the civilian world by force. They simply waited for the free market to monetize your digital existence, and then they tapped the feed. We trace the blueprints back to 1946, when the Five Eyes Alliance created a legal shell game to bypass constitutional law. They divided the globe to spy on each other's citizens. Decades later, that same bureaucratic loophole evolved into the Prism program. They stopped intercepting analog signals from the sky and legally coerced Silicon Valley into opening the back doors. Corporate data mining was nationalized into a military asset without a single shot fired. You might still believe that your privacy is protected because your messages are encrypted, or because your conversations are mundane. But the protocol dictates that your content is entirely irrelevant. The system kills by code, relying strictly on metadata. It only cares about the mathematical footprint of your existence, the exact geographic coordinates of your phone, the duration of your connections, and the proximity of your device to other targets. We handed this infinite ocean of behavioral metadata to artificial intelligence. Large language models and predictive algorithms now calculate the statistical probability of your future actions. You are continuously scored by a machine that no human can fully comprehend. The surveillance architecture has decoupled from human oversight. It is a self-sustaining organism, warehousing your encrypted data in Utah under a store now, decrypt later policy, waiting for quantum computers. This brings us to the ultimate success of a modern surveillance state. A traditional dictatorship forces its citizens into compliance through fear and physical walls. But the most perfect digital prison is the one where the inmates willingly purchase their own tracking devices. You pay a premium for the sleek glass rectangle in your pocket, and you carry it everywhere. You gladly surrendered your absolute anonymity for the frictionless convenience of the modern internet. The forensic reality is that opting out is now a mathematical impossibility. You cannot simply disconnect or leave your phone at home. To step off the grid in 2026 is to cease functioning in human society. Your credit cards, your vehicle navigation, your medical records, and your smart home appliances are all continuously broadcasting your life to the cloud. You are trapped in a symbiotic relationship with the very machine that monitors your every breath. The architecture of paranoia is now structurally complete. We must accept the harsh verdict that we are no longer citizens navigating a truly free world. We have been successfully downgraded to predictable data points, flowing through the optical veins of an intelligence apparatus that never sleeps, never forgets, and never stops listening. The Constitution you rely on is an analog document trying to govern a quantum reality, and the math has already won the war. When Claude Shannon laid the foundations of information theory, he proved that all communication could be reduced to binary logic. He gave us the digital age, but he could not have predicted that this same math would be weaponized to strip away our fundamental right to exist unseen. We built the ultimate library of Alexandria, but we installed a hidden microphone inside every single book. The legacy of the West is now defined by the infrastructure of its own paranoia. The case file on Echelon is officially closed, but the physical dragnet remains fully operational. Tomorrow morning, you will wake up, unlock your screen, and feed the algorithm another day of your life. The invisible tripwires will register your heartbeat, your transit route, and your financial transactions. The system does not judge you, it merely calculates you. You are a highly predictable variable in an equation designed to eliminate uncertainty from the world. The evidence is laid bare on the table, and the burden of knowledge is now yours. If this forensic investigation has permanently altered how you view the glowing screen in your hand, hit the like button to confirm the signal was received. The algorithm is watching us anyway, so leave a comment below with your verdict on whether privacy can ever be reclaimed. To continue decoding the invisible systems that govern our reality, subscribe and join the active investigation. We surrendered our shadows to the servers in exchange for an easier life. The global wiretap is not a glitch. It is the operating system of reality. You must survive in a world where being forgotten is a luxury you can no longer afford. The evidence is filed, and the final report is sealed. Watch your footprint, because the machine is always listening. The investigation is officially closed. Signing off.